Hello everyone, I'm Matt Rowe and welcome to episode 24 of the Zwift Power Up Cycling Podcast. And just to recap on the aim of this podcast, which is to help you power up and become a better cyclist yourself by taking on some of the advice and guidance from us as hosts, but also our guests and hopefully generally some entertaining chats centered around cycling and Zwift. So I'm joined by two other co-hosts who combined have won numerous Olympic and World titles, plus Commonwealth Games titles. We've got Tour de France's, Grand Tours, basically all the biggest bike races in the world. Kristin Armstrong and Greg Henderson.
Hello, it's great to be back.
Yes, it's fantastic. And did you know, a little fact here, mate, between the two of us, we've won 3 Olympic titles, and not one of them is mine.
Very good.
Not one of them belongs to you or me, Rowie, but that's fine.
That's a nice title, isn't it?
Boy.
But yeah, as always, there's loads going on in the world of cycling. And I think the main event throughout July is always the Tour de France. So who's the man of the match for you guys?
To be honest, I think the man of the match is Ineos. I mean, for the last 8 years, they've won 7 Tour de France's. They've definitely got the preparation correct, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's true. You know, I absolutely loved watching the Tour this year. It's been quite some time since I've been as engaged as I was this year. It's because every day it was just an exciting, to me, just real deal, like grunt. You never knew what was going to happen as a spectator. And so I actually had the opportunity to learn a lot about riders that I didn't even know their name prior to this Tour de France.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Alaphilippe, he was a standout. I think he made the race so exciting. You know, I'm obviously a massive Ineos fan. With G and my brother riding for the team. But I think it's one of the most exciting. It's great to see Ineos being pushed to the line because the last couple of years have been a little bit, I'd say, predictable. He's kind of, it's so well controlled. So I think it's probably the best tour, as you guys are saying, best tour in years.
Really enjoyable. No, and okay, I was a little disappointed for the last 2 days just because I could see what tactics, obviously I'm a G fan, and I could see the tactics that were playing out with Sky, and I really think there was an opportunity on that stage where Bernal took off at the high altitude. He still had a long way to go. I've been through that valley myself, and it's a long drag. Okay, he had Simon Yates with him, and I'm sure they would have made some kind of deal on the road, one being a stage win versus one taking the yellow jersey. However, G had a lot of good bike riders with him still, and he still had a 7k climb to get across to Bernal. So I think the real loser there was G, no question. But the way he handled it, I mean, hats off to G. He just absolutely was, the next day just rode in 100% for Bernal. I was super impressed with G.
Yeah, just the ultimate team player, isn't he, G? I mean, if he's obviously happy to take the race by the scruff of the neck and win it himself. But I think he's genuinely happy to see Bernal win. And just about Egan Bernal, first Colombian to win the Tour de France. What's that going to do to cycling in Colombia, do you think?
I think it's going to change the world of cycling. I think that whenever you see any hero or top athlete from any country, you can see what it does, no different than Froome did in the UK. And, it's happened here in America with a number of riders. It's happened, across the world. And so this time around, it's Colombia, and it will be interesting. I really am excited to see the growth, not only with the men's cycling, but also it does trickle into the women's as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, at only 22 years old, what a confident bloke. I mean, my brother was telling me before Paris-Nice this year, just before the final stage, so he pretty much had yellow wrapped up and the team were offered some new Oakleys. And he sat on the bus and Egan had a pair of those new Oakley Sutro glasses in his hand. He's contemplating wearing them, unsure whether they suited him or not. Different glasses have different blind spots and different things like that. And some of the staff were kind of suggesting, stick to what don't take any risks. And Egan just stood up and said, guys, I'm going to go win Paris-Nice in my new glasses. And then the whole team just kind of roared and confidence and leadership, all at 22. And I think he's got a bright future, I think.
It's incredible, mate. Like you think back In 1975 was when they first ever rode the tour. Like, it's been going since 1903, you know. And then I remember, my first memory was that Luis Herrera, when he won on Alpe d'Huez. I actually remember watching the tour and watching that, you know, I remember always the iconic mountaintop finishes, and Alpe d'Huez is obviously one of the favourites. But, you know, they've visited the podium 6 times now. You know, and that includes Egan, but of course there's Rigoberto Urán and obviously Nairo Quintana. So I think we've probably witnessed 5 of the podium visits. So you can tell Colombian cycling is just massively on the up at the moment. It's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into our main topic for today. It's all about heat, really, heat and humidity. And with the Tokyo Olympics just under a year away, and the Paralympics following shortly after, being such a challenging climate, and we're going to focus on that climate in this podcast. I actually checked out the forecast for Tokyo about an hour ago, and today's temperatures hit 93 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 34 degrees Celsius, 2 miles an hour of wind, and a humidity of 89%. So basically, it's super humid, hot as hell, no wind, just all around savage. So, Greg, you had a great idea, your first ever, to be fair, and that was to chat with someone who knows inside out about heat, humidity, and all this good stuff. Your professor, he was your professor, Greg, right? He's your lecturer.
Correct.
Cool. So, you chatted with Professor Jim Cotter. And before we jump into Greg's chat with Professor Jim, the chat was so intense and interesting, we've broken it down into 2 halves. So this is part 1, and part 2 will be in the next podcast. So here we go.
Well, welcome, and thanks very much, Professor Jim Cotter, for joining us here on the Zwift Power Up podcast. I really appreciate your time, and it's great having an expert on all things relating to extreme environment, altitude, hot, cold, and the rest of it. So thanks very much from Otago University, you're joining us.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks.
So I first met old Professor Jimbo end of last year it was. I got a phone call from a mutual friend of ours actually, Carolyn Jenkins, and she said, Hendy, you know that you've only got about 3 or 4 papers left to finish your degree. And I thought, oh yeah, why not? I'll have a crack at it. And one of those papers fortunately happened to be your advanced exercise physiology.
Yeah, and then you went back and did the normal physiology after that. Which is, I think that's the first time anyone's ever done that.
I'll tell you that I was just so scared. Like when I went to class, it was just like I was straight back to school, thrown in the deep end after 15 years. I remember lining up in your class for the first time and opening up my notebook, and everyone folds their laptops, and I was like, oh God, Greg, you're showing your age here. But no, it was really good. I really could understand like the content. I really enjoyed the lectures and the labs, and then all of a sudden it came to writing a lab report, and mate, I was just
sure to remember that.
I was a fish out of water. Jeez, it was a struggle. But no, thanks to your help and the whole PE school, but you know, obviously yourself and Nancy for getting me through it. It's been fantastic, and yeah, it's great to be able to reconnect again.
Yeah, not at all. And it's always good to have people coming back into class who've been around the block a bit too, and can put life skills back into the class discussions. Makes a big difference.
Yes. What we wanted to talk about a little bit today, is Tokyo Olympics. Now, we just had a couple of test events over in Tokyo. Obviously, the Olympics are a year away now, 360 days away, I think. And we all know, okay, yes, we're going to have hot and humid. And, you know, everyone's been in a hot and humid environment before, and I'm sure most of us have tried to exercise in a hot and humid environment, and it's been harder than a hot and dry environment. But why is that? What's going on there?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the humidity is the real tester, in the sense that a decent athlete relies mostly on evaporation to get rid of your heat. You just produce so much heat, and the better the athlete, the more heat you produce and the more you rely on your evaporation. So what's going on is that Tokyo is going to put decent athletes up against the wall more than they have been at any game, because the fittest ones are going to will find it the hardest. We know from running marathons, for example, that the fastest runners typically don't get knocked around by heat as much as the ones who are coming along a bit further behind them. But with high humidity, we suspect it might be the other way around. For example, if you're running fast, for example, in like 0 degrees, you might still be losing half your heat through evaporation, but you don't really know it because it's evaporating so easily. You're not aware that it's how a lot of your heat disappearing. So you're offloading maybe half through convection and radiation. So it dissipates to the air around you and it radiates to the surfaces around you. And then the other half goes through evaporation. And as I say, your skin's relatively dry. It's happening easily. You're not aware that the sweating, that the heat loss is happening that way. You put someone in the heat and there's very little capacity to actually offload much heat through dry mechanisms. So they can't radiate much away because the things around them are so warm, and they can't convect much away because the air around them is so warm. So anyone saturates those mechanisms quite quickly. You can't exercise that hard before you've used up those mechanisms. So then all the extra heat has to go through evaporation, or you can store heat and you basically cook, you go up to your terminal temperatures. So your speed's limited by how fast you can evaporate, which is not how much you can sweat. So you may sweat well above what you can evaporate, which means you're just wasting sweat, you're just dehydrating more, and it's not helping you at all. And you're not able to cool down with that extra sweating either. So you are just heating up. So in that sense, the people who move the fastest and reduce they're exercising the hardest, produce the most heat, are going to be most at risk. And unfortunately, the coaches and some of the athletes that are doing events that you don't have that heat production, like a lot of your field events, they won't notice that because they're just not generating those sort of rates of heat production. So it's going to be the likes of the cyclists, triathletes, the walkers, they're going to be really up against it.
So you were saying, okay, in a hot environment, humid or dry, you're gonna heat up and you're gonna have this problem with convection, and that's gonna happen in any hot.
Yeah, like any hot environment. Exactly, any hot environment. I mean, you have limited capacity to evaporate and to convect and radiate heat away. But most, like a desert environments, it feels hot to somebody who's not exercising that hard. But for somebody who's exercising, it's actually not that bad because you've got such a big gradient to evaporate.
That's so true.
As in the water vapor pressure on your skin and the water vapor pressure in the environment, that's the gradient that you've got to work with. That determines how fast you can offload heat and therefore how fast you can exercise. But you go into humidity, reduce that gradient, and that really limits you. And Tokyo will be unlike any other Olympics in that respect.
So gradient is, yes, so that's meaning basically the air around us that we're exercising in, that's got water vapor in it. That's humidity, isn't it?
Yeah, and that gradient determines how fast evaporation can happen, and that determines how fast you can keep going.
Right, so the wet surface, the water on your skin has to evaporate. Evaporation is water into the air. If that air already has a lot of water in it, like i.e. humid, then of course it's got nowhere to go. The air is almost full of water already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing people may not realize is like you could be in 15 degrees and 80% humidity, but 25 degrees and 80% humidity is twice as humid. So people don't kind of realize that the relative humidity is not the important thing. It's the absolute humidity, and most people don't know what absolute humidity is. It's literally just the amount of water in the air. So every 10 degrees that you raise air temperature, it can hold roughly twice as much water. So Tokyo being low 30s and high relative humidity, that's got a lot more water than a desert type environment. That might even be 40 degrees and 15 or 20% humidity.
Because it's hot, the air has more potential to store more water, i.e. become more humid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so that's called your relative humidity, is that right?
Yeah, like a desert might be, let's say, 44 degrees and 10% humidity, which is actually not a bad environment to exercise in. It's a horrible environment to be in because you're sweating and you know it's hot because your skin's hot. But it's not as oppressive as, let's say, being in 30 degrees and 85% humidity. And it's because a decent athlete, they rely on being able to evaporate. And if you don't have that gradient, that water vapor pressure gradient, you can't do it. You can't sustain exercise, which means
That's incredible, isn't it?
which means all your short races, that's not so bad because you got opportunity to store heat. So what you most got to do in that environment is make sure you don't start too warm, because you're really just up against who can store the most heat before they hit their terminal temperature.
And by storing, you mean?
Exercising, and if you can't get rid of it, you have to store it. I mean, there's no other option. It just gets stored. As in, so your body temperature just accumulates heat, body tissue temperatures rise, and at some point you'll come unstuck with it.
So so you basically your whole body just gets hotter and hotter, and at some point you'll come unstuck. But if the event's short enough, the chances are the event will finish before you can't store any more heat.
Yeah, it depends on the event, and it depends on what work you've done in the meantime. So if you're going to do a break in a road race, for example, you better know what you're doing. You know, you don't want to be doing any extra work than you have to, and you don't want to start warmer than you have to. And in fact, a lot of people will be pre-cooling, so that it increases their capacity to be able to store that heat.
So that would be one of our strategies that we'd put in place, wouldn't it? For sure, we could pre-cool for an event.
Yeah.
One of the other questions that we had pop up a number of times was during the event. Okay, so now firstly, let's go back to what events are we looking at that are actually going to be affected the most? Are we talking, obviously the longer distance ones, but is a marathon what about the 50K walk? Like, you're not going fast.
Well, they're going faster than I can run. That's not saying much. It's not saying much, but they move, and it's incredibly energetically expensive to walk because you've got to push your foot down. Otherwise, I mean, the thing that stops them running is they have to get that foot down before the other one takes off, and that takes a lot of energy. Use a lot more muscle to be able to keep both feet on the ground at the same time. So because it's energetically inefficient, humans already generate a tremendous amount of heat just to run. It needs even more to walk at that, at any decent speed. So yeah, they're going to be up against it, and they're out there for so long that they can start a call, but that's only going to have a certain amount of help for them. They're out there for so long that they're really by themselves.
If you took that and compared that to a cyclist out there in the road race for 6 hours, a cyclist is averaging, the men, they might average 45 Ks an hour. Like, isn't the wind going to cool them down at all?
Yeah, it will do, in the sense that it will allow, it depends on the air temperature, but let's say the air temperature will be up near skin temperature, so let's say it'll be like 33. There's very little heat they're going to offload through convection and not much through radiation.
Okay.
Because the things around them will be so warm. So they depend on evaporation, but that's an exponential relation in the sense that the extra speed they have doesn't actually provide them much advantage, because it's the first 10K an hour that had the biggest effect. The next 10K an hour didn't have as much effect. And, they're up around 40K an hour. It's not much different to 30K an hour. So you don't add another 10K an hour. It costs you a disproportionate amount of energy, in the sense that, as you know, to go 10K an hour faster takes it. Like, if that's 25% faster, it's costing you a lot more than 25% more energy. And therefore, you're generating a lot more than 25% more heat, but you don't have 25% more capacity to get rid of it, because you've almost saturated that. Saturated is an unfortunate pun. I mean, you've already, maximized that. So
your prediction that the events that need to really, really take care or take notice of this humidity, what events are you predicting to be affected the most?
It could be across the board. For me, it depends on how much people warm up. For example, the rowing events, they're technically not so long that they shouldn't get into trouble if they're managed appropriately, because it's, 6 to 7.5 minutes or whatever isn't the duration that should be a problem if you haven't warmed up too much beforehand. The ones that for me will be a problem, potentially the yachting, like people who've got low-grade chronic exposure across the day, the team sports, because the stop-start nature of the exercise, shielded environments, in the sense of low wind, high radiant heat load in those playing areas, and just the really high intensity intermittent nature of them. They're really heat producing type sports. The triathlon, the marathon, the road race, the various track. I don't know what the track, whether it'll be air conditioned there. I think it will be, won't it? The cycling track.
Nah, they typically keep them warm for speed.
Yeah, but they're trying to keep the humidity down.
A humid track's really slow. I know that. It's like riding through soup.
Yeah, so the guys that are out there doing the points race and stringing different races together, as long as they don't keep too warm between, there's a lot to be gained and lost in that respect. So presumably most of the teams will be sorting that out, and they'll be bringing heat in as a factor there. How warm do you want to be going on to some of these races, depending on how many races you're doing and how long is that race? Sure, I mean, I know the sprints, you need to be warm, but a points race, you've only got so much capacity to be able to warm up. So they're trading those things off against each other.
That's one of the things that's changed so much with track cycling now, and I've noticed over the years is, I mean, we used to always, when I first started, back in the dark ages, it was an hour warm up without question on the rollers, just going for it. Whereas now we can finish a warm up in 15 minutes, and that you're physiologically ready to race your bike at a very high capacity if the gun was to go and the hammer was to go down from the gun, and you've only done maximum 15 minutes of warming up on the bike.
Yeah, well, we did a study on that once with 4K guys, and because that's you're all out using all energy systems, essentially going at VO2 max. It's a type of event you should need to be warmed up for. And we did either no warm up, we gave them a 6-minute warm up that we considered was pretty optimal, or we let them do their own warm up, and their own warm up ranged between, I think, from memory, 11 or 15 minutes and 80 minutes. Exactly as you say, they're just out there forever. And it actually made no difference whether we gave them a 6-minute warm-up or they did their own one. And there's some psych aspects to that as well. So, and they were both a little bit better than not warming up at all. Yeah, so if warm-up has a supposed optimal way to do it, why do people have such variable warm-ups?
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? From 6 minutes to 80 minutes, and the result, I'm sure all the national bodies or governing bodies have got that'll be one of the first things that they look at will be, okay, warm-up protocols, warm-up strategies.
Oh, they have to. They absolutely have to, yeah.
So then my next question will be, during an exercise, say you've got the chance, let's go to the men's road race because it's easy to talk about. I was always a fan of, during the Vuelta, okay, this was hot and dry, 40 degrees, but I just loved ice down the back of my neck. We'd put little pantyhose. We'd send this Swan-Years off to the supermarket to buy a whole heap of pantyhose, and he'd be filling that with ice and shoving it. We'd shove that down the back of our neck, and then through every feed or whenever we saw someone on the side of the road that we knew or go back to the car, we'd get bottles of water and ice cold water, tip over the head really quickly. But I don't think that was actually cooling down my core temperature at all. So. And then there's the story, is putting ice on your head a good idea? I mean, I always remember the story of an athlete in my first Commonwealth Games I went to, a guy named Craig Barrett. He was doing the 50-kilometre walk, and he was putting ice under his hat when he was walking, and then all of a sudden he just had critical meltdown not far from the finish. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And my question is, obviously that's not the place to put your ice. Is ice down the back of your neck bad? Is there anywhere else we should be cooling down?
It's really convoluted, and I think any athlete going into that environment needs to have a pretty good talk with the support people around them. And we can't deal with that in a forum like this, but there's a lot involved. There's a huge amount involved. I think for me, ice beforehand in your stomach is one of the most effective ways to cool down. The extent to which it actually helps performance in the lab, it does help performance. I wouldn't ingest ice during a race because you just can't get enough fluid into you quick enough. The ice cream headache's what the limiting factor there, and the ability to get ice is, slushy form ice as well. And then again, you can have ice at, -4 degrees, and you can have water as cold as you can get it at 1-2 degrees. The ice is so many, I think it's almost 3 times more effective at cooling you down than if you have really cold water. And they both give you an ice cream headache. So you either have ice or you have water that's not so cold that you can't drink as much as you need to drink. So that's a biggie before you start. The notion, and it's the same as Craig Barrett with the ice under the cap. I mean, as far as I know, it was never definitively known that was the problem. But
okay.
One of the issues we know is your head's really thermosensitive. If you cool someone's head down, they feel good. I mean, you know that.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah.
So be careful what you wish for is what you're alluding to there, isn't it? That you feel better than you really are, and therefore you push it too hard. And that's the fine line that the athlete and the sports scientist and the coach are walking. You know, if someone's in an Olympic final, do they have enough arousal and motivation to perform anyway? And if you give them these things that we know in the lab these things work. It doesn't mean they work in elite athletes, and it doesn't mean they work in an Olympic final. But if they do, at some point, if that person's highly motivated enough, you've pushed them too far. So again, this is why you can't solve these things in a forum like this. You know, the first do no harm, I think, is the rule. So do you want to cool down or not? Because we know we can push you harder. We know we can fool the thermoregulatory system into maybe pushing a bit harder. So yeah, as I say, there's a lot involved.
So it's one of the questions was the science or the theory that putting ice close to the hypothalamus affects the body's perceived thermoregulation.
Yeah, it's not so much that. It's just that the face is highly thermosensitive. Like the face is 2 to 5 times more sensitive than any other region of the body. So if you want to cool someone down and make them feel good, stick it in their head, around their head. And it's not the proximity to the brain necessarily that's the issue. It's just the input that has, the neural input. But if you want to cool someone down and make them not feel so much, curiously, you put it on their hands, their forearms and their hands, because they can feel damn well that that's cold, but it doesn't make them feel cold. And at the same token, it draws a lot of heat out of their body without shutting their sweating down. So you'd say, oh, okay, well then we'll stick, ice and cold water around the hands and draw a lot of heat away. And there's devices, I'm sure you know, that are made to do exactly that. They're not very useful on a bike. You don't carry your hand coolers on a bike unless you cool your handlebars down, I suppose.
You can strap your forearms with ice or something like that with it.
Yeah, I mean, if the weight's worth it and if the hassle's worth it, and it just gives you something else to have to think about. But sure. Well, I mean, in Tokyo, you'd sort of say, well, maybe we don't want to do that because, in any other environment, because we don't want to reduce your sweating. But in Tokyo, if you're already sweating more than you can evaporate, then maybe we do want to do that type of thing. So again, that's just another illustration of why Tokyo is going to be pretty unique and why these things have to be thought through really well beforehand. And it's the same with heat acclimation. We know if we heat acclimatize people, we make them sweat more, and they need a lot of heat acclimation to make them do that. Like that's one of the slowest things to develop as you become more heat adapted. But do you really want to do that for Tokyo? It depends how humid your environment's, your race situation's going to be. So maybe we don't want to be doing that because maybe we don't want that extra, aspect of heat acclimation because you're getting an adaptation you really don't. It's not going to help you in that environment. Because of the unique situation of exercising so hard in such a humid environment. It is a really special environment.
Wow, there's going to be some merry mix-up. We could see some unknown, well, not unknown, but we could see some off-the-chart winners type thing, like, probably someone that's not even popped up on the radar.
Oh, absolutely. They'll sit in the pack.
He's got the preparation correct.
They've got everything correct in terms of the preparation. They haven't warmed up too much. They've sat in the pack and not done too much work. They work really efficiently. They don't waste energy and do too many surges, which have all sorts of implications. Oh yeah, there's a lot involved in it, all right.
So guys, I had to pause and re-listen to some parts of that chat. Just so interesting and so much knowledge in there. I mean, you've obviously you've learned from the best there, Greg.
Yeah, he's a great man actually, and he always takes time to help out. That's why I knew he'd be absolutely fine with chatting to us. Yeah, it's like almost everything he says. There's a point in there or a fact in there that you need to sort of take on board and go back and re-listen to that. One of the interesting ones, I remember learning it in class actually, but it was about relative humidity and actual humidity, whereas he's telling us that relative humidity isn't really the problem. It's because every 10 degrees in temperature you go up, you can double the amount of water that the air temperature can hold. So if you're 10 degrees Celsius, this is, Kristin, do you understand what the difference between between Fahrenheit and, you got that down?
I just double it and add 30. It's just, something like that.
Kind of works.
Yeah. Divide by the number of spanners in a chrome tool set. Yeah, you got it right. No, but every 10 degrees you go up, you can double the amount of water you can hold in the air. So 80% humidity at 10 degrees, and then all of a sudden you're talking 34, 35 degrees in Tokyo with 83%. It's like walking around in soup, mate.
Yeah, it's absolutely savage. And I was trying to think about what can I take away and learn from all this. And I think pre-cooling sounded to be of interest and something like you can practice, but that's only really important for the longer races. And look at the road race in the Olympics, or any road race or sportive event. If you stay cool before the start, great. But then if that race is 4, 5, 6 hours long, like the men's and women's road races in the Olympics and lots of sportive events, and Professor Jim mentions, the faster you go, you make more effort, you work harder, create more heat. So kind of any increase in wind speed to cool you down is far outweighed by the increase in body temperature. So basically that kind of pre-cooling doesn't really work then for long events. It's more short distance events, like on the track and short time trials.
Well, I wouldn't say it doesn't work. Like, there's definitely studies that show your core temperature will start to raise at a later time if you've pre-cooled. But what you're saying, I think what you're alluding to is that, like, okay, 6 hours, what's an extra 15 minutes of being cool going to do for me? Because that's what it essentially does. It lowers your core temperature and it gives you about 15 minutes of intense exercise before your body temperature comes back to where it would be, So, yeah, it is one. I know what you're saying. It's like 6 hours, is it worth it? But absolutely. I mean, don't warm up for the road race. That'll be the key I'll be telling guys. Like, you do not need to warm up for this, because start cold, because you've got 6 hours and you may get, even if you get half an hour of comfort, even if you get 20 minutes, it's better than just starting and going, oh, I am uncomfortable from kilometer zero.
Sure.
Really what stuck out to me was the knowledge that it takes outside is just another great reminder around, we talk so much about, our workouts and our training plans, but it's that 1% edge that you're going to have. And during the interview, we talked about, are we going to see some people that are on the podium that we didn't expect to be on the podium because of maybe the lead up to and the knowledge they had on how they're going to maybe do pre-cooling, but also the psychological piece of pre-cooling and what is actually pre-cooling and bringing that core body temperature down versus psychologically, what do you think is actually cooling your body and what effects does that have later on? Because when you think about a warm-up and you think about all the athletes that go out, and whether it's for an endurance sport like a triathlon or walking event or race walking or a running event or a time trial, there's something that we've have ingrained in us, and it probably came from an original coach. And some people are doing 30-minute warm-ups, some people are doing 60-minute warm-ups, some people are doing 25.5-minute warm-ups, but we know what we know, and I know throughout my career I didn't change my warm-up one bit. And what it's made me think about is, how do we practice with our athletes? How do we practice psychologically getting over the fact that we don't need to do a 30-minute warm-up, that we really could have great benefits if we can just get over the fact that we don't need to do this and go to the start line with a core temperature that's much less than if we were to have kept our normal longer warm-up.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And I can even speak for myself as a young fella representing New Zealand on the track. I'd be doing an hour warm-up on the rollers, no fan on me, no ice vest or anything like that. And I'd turn up to the start line absolutely almost cooked. And now, like as I finished my career, it would be 12 minutes. I'd do a 12-minute warm-up all the time, every time the same. And yeah, you knew you were ready to go. You didn't need an hour.
What was the turning point for you to take it from 60-minute warm-up to a 12-minute warm-up? That's intriguing to me.
Yeah, it was science-based, because we got the chat, and it wasn't even that long ago. It was with Team Sky, that their exercise physiologists had obviously worked it out with British Cycling, and so it was like once I got on there and worked out, and I think the biggest thing, like you were saying, Kristin, I think the athletes have to be confident in the warm-up themselves, so even just trying it in training, a shortened warm-up before you do a workout or an effort or something, and so you know in your head, actually, this is all I need. I did it really well here on this effort, or so. And they'll be really surprised actually how good you feel.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of those changes in theories and techniques, or in this case, warm up duration, how quickly it ripples around the world. You're saying you started doing it with Sky, and then obviously next thing you know, you're going to translate that onto all the stuff you're doing on the track and in New Zealand. Next thing you know, everyone's just doing shorter warm-ups. And some nations for sure, and some riders will be doing it on the basis that, well, everyone else does it. And it just kind of suddenly becomes culturally, we all do short warm-ups now, whereas 10 years ago it was long warm-ups.
Well, I heard it on podcast number 34 of the Zwift Power Up podcast that you should be pre-calling. That's what they'll hear. That's what they'll be saying.
Absolutely. And of course, on Zwift, heat is also a factor there. And, Professor Jim spoke about, putting ice on your head is probably not the best idea, even though in the tour, you've seen riders dropping ice cubes into in their vents in their helmet. But what he did say is his best advice was putting ice cubes on your wrists and not on your hands. Obviously, that's challenging out on the road, but for Zwifters, that's kind of as a perfect opportunity there. If you obviously fans is a perfect tool to cool you down. If that's not quite enough, then get some sort of ice packs taped to your wrists on indoors for Zwift.
His key point there was, he always says this, he says, be careful what you wish for. So putting ice on your head, you're wanting the effect of feeling cold. Now, if you do this, then your body might switch off its sweating mechanism, and in actual fact, then your body's not cool, but your brain thinks that it is, so it stops sweating. And as we know, sweating's our number one way of cooling our body down. So all of a sudden, you stop sweating, your core temperature just rips through the roof, and that's because you had, literally bucket loads of ice over your head. The reason for the wrists is it can draw heat, no question, it'll draw heat, but you don't feel, if your wrist's a bit cold, you don't feel super cold. It's not the chilling effect. You're actually just drawing heat from the body. So I just think, a mixture of the both. I used to love, there's nothing better than a bit of cold water over your head during a race. It was just Volta Spania, 40 degrees plus, a nice cold bidden over your head. You just felt so refreshed.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we should give a special shout out to some of our listeners in super hot countries. I think the UAE, India, Mexico, our Japanese listeners, Australia, Thailand, Philippines, and Colombia. I think they're probably some of our hottest nations. So guys in those countries, especially, hopefully this chat, or the first half of this chat with between Greg and Professor Jim has been of interest, and obviously tune into the part 2 for more. Moving on then, team, to look at a Zwift session. I think with Prudential Ride London just around the corner, and again, it may have just been, depending on when you listen to this podcast, the Prudential Ride London training plan has been out on Zwift for the last 16 weeks and has helped thousands prepare for Prudential Ride London this weekend. So let's talk a little bit more generally first about training plans in Zwift. I guess, why bother following a training plan versus doing your own thing?
I think that the training plans that Zwift offers truly keeps people accountable. It keeps people accountable not only to getting that workout in or the number of workouts you've chosen for the week in, but also you are now accountable for the outcome of those numbers. And I think that it provides motivation. There's a community that you can train with. There's a community that you can, part of the training plan sometimes is not just a structured workout, but there's options to go and do a group ride or do a recovery ride. And so there's a community that is most likely experiencing or going through a similar training plan as you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That I have this little hashtag that I put when I do group rides or I lead some rides on Zwift. I have a hashtag misery loves company, and it's so true, though, isn't it? As long as someone else is suffering away with you, it kind of feels a little bit better. Like you're not the only one suffering.
It feels a lot better.
It always helps me anyway.
100%.
Yeah, but the training plans, they're fantastic because it's almost like you think of yourself as a blank canvas. And so, okay, I'm starting from, starting from scratch, and then I know I'm getting layered at certain levels by this training program, and it's designed specifically for an end goal. Like there's a lot of people that won't have actually had a target event in their lives before, so now they know, okay, I'm following a program that's actually going to make me arrive at this event in the best condition that I can be in. So it's a really good learning curve for a lot of people out there that get to follow a structure. No guesswork, no kind of, if you do it yourself, you're like, I sort of feel like I haven't done this for a while, maybe I'll try this, or I haven't done any sprinting. But you know that this program that you're doing, okay, this is going to keep me on track, and it's designed for a peak at the end, and my goal is this. I think it's a great learning curve for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think most Zwifters generally tight for time, and not many people have got the luxury of having hours and hours and hours every day to ride their bike. So you want to be sure you're training efficiently in that short amount of time you have available. And that's another thing these training plans are designed to do. They're all very specific. This one's for PRL. So there's a huge aerobic element to the plan. The event is 100 miles, and there's well thought out progression and periodization built into the plan. I think Kev actually come up with a PRL plan, and there's loads of mitochondria titled workouts or mito sessions, as Kev calls them.
Oh, we love the mitochondria.
Yeah. But again, it's obviously the focus on developing a key attribute for PRL and sporty, so endurance. They're not trying to be trying to make you fast like the quick crusher plan or other plans. It's trying to help you complete a long ride, 100 miles, whether that's in real life or on the Zwift PRL Fondos, which are happening on Sunday as well. So yeah, I think it's a great example of where these training plans in game have a crazy amount of thought, science, and common sense applied to them, with the end result being helping to give training sessions to you guys that are going to be really helpful to help you become better bike riders. Cool. All right. All hail Zwift training plans.
All hail.
All hail. All right. Terminology then, guys. Greg, have you got a term for me?
I have, yeah. It's a little bit of Kiwi Aussie slang, but I'm sure you'll know it. You've got 30 seconds to explain this. Have you got the timer ready, Kristin?
I am ready.
Okay, the term that you have to explain in 30 seconds, my man, is gutter time.
Gutter time. Ooh, well, fun time if you look back and you see gutter time, but if you're in it, it's pretty savage. This is generally where you are in the gutter, so far edge of the road, and you're basically chewing your stem. You could go flat out. It's that hard. Everyone's just in single file. Normally in crosswinds, because you're kind of forced into the gutter as opposed to being in the middle of the road or somewhere. And it's generally where you see a lot of splits occur. If you're organised as a team or group of riders, you can really benefit and do some damage.
And you're done.
Good job, mate. Bang on. Spot on there.
Gutter time. Yeah.
Spent a few hours there, mate.
Yeah, I was about to say, you probably spent a few hours there, and Kristin, you probably stuck a lot of riders there in your road racing time.
Yeah, I love gutter time.
Kristin was doing it, and I was receiving.
Yeah, it's amazing. All those races in Holland, I'll tell you what.
Don't you find they're the best though? The Belgies, the Dutchies, they're just so good. I mean, obviously it's their landscape, isn't it? Like they're just so used to crosswinds, and as soon as you go race them, you can actually see, wow, this is actually another skill that you have to add to your repertoire or whatever that you actually need to learn when you're going to hit a crosswind, where to be when the crosswind happens. So it's otherwise you are spending some gutter time.
Big time. It's funny how we come up with those stereotypes, and it's true. But, Dutch riders, they at home, and you kind of, if you were to picture a Dutch rider, I've got one, kind of in Roubaix or something, covered in dust in a gutter. Whereas you picture an Italian rider, they've probably got the jersey unzipped, riding up some massive climb with a big gold chain hanging from their neck or something. It's those, yeah. Cool. All right, then, quick fire question then, team. What do you put in your bottles or bidons for a big day on the bike?
A very weak carbohydrate drink.
Me too.
I focus a lot on making sure that I have the electrolyte balance dialed in.
Interesting. So Greg, why not a strong mix?
Well, if I'm going for a long ride, I'm typically looking for a endurance response or an endurance stress. So if we take it to the scientific level, it's trying to deplete your body, your legs, a little bit of the carbohydrate source, so then you have an extra stress on your body, and you do an adaptation. You start adapting to a low carbohydrate environment, which is often happens at the end of races, and a shift in substrate availability, which is, typically you can start burning some fats at a lower intensity. So that's the reason I start with low, and I seem to always burn carbohydrates. I've always been, I think from my my sprinting background and my muscle fiber type, they just love chewing carbohydrates. So I can't go zero carbs and go very far, but I can go low carb and get a really good training response from it.
Cool. Makes sense, and I guess the reason I've given the same answer is I just can't stomach strong carb drink. But the reason I like carb drink is it just helps obviously trickle the fuel in. So if you do forget to eat and don't eat quite as much as you should, then it's kind of your backup. How about you, Kristin? What's the thinking with your electrolytes?
Yeah, I feel like when I started racing and quite competitively, and I needed to make sure that I was hydrated properly, I always felt like I was hydrating with the wrong type of, I would say, mix that the team would provide on my bike. And it took a lot of hard racing and hard learning experience once, that feeling when your gut's like protruding out so far, you're like, I don't think I can like absorb anything else in my stomach. And so I always say I was like born in the Gatorade era where
my stomach's like that 24/7 now.
Well, we know, yeah. And so once I dialed in, I felt like the more of the minerals and the sodium and the potassium and the magnesium, just knowing that if I had a right balance there, that was sort of my baseline foundation. Of course, I would obviously have drinks that would have the lower carbohydrate involved, but I had to be super careful. But I found that if I went back to the basics and said, what's the most important thing for me to actually, if I can't absorb the fluids, then nothing's working regardless of what I do. So I started back with the basics and started making sure that I had the right electrolyte balance. And then I was able to go obviously lower carbohydrate, but it made it very, very important that the fuel intake that I had throughout the race became even more critical because I wasn't getting as much of that caloric intake as possibly someone that can just like guzzle down the higher carbohydrate hydration mix.
Sure.
It's a pretty loaded question though, isn't it?
Yeah, we can keep talking about it.
There's so many variables to that answer.
I mean, so sometimes there's nothing better than water. After if you're taking gels and bars and you're eating stuff, when you get to the end of a ride, the two things I often crave is either a can of Coke or just water. So again, what it boils down to is all very personal. And what's your strategy on getting all those, getting the carbs in and getting the calories in? Is it, do you prefer it by drink, by solids? How disciplined are you with it? And ultimately what you like the taste of. Because I always come back to, you can have the best thing for you in your bottle, but if you don't like it, subconsciously you're just going to ignore your bottle and you're not going to drink enough of it.
100%, mate. 100%. That's the number one, don't you think, Kristin? Is like, you've got to actually like the drink. You have to make a drink. It can have all the wonderful bells and whistles inside that drink for you, but if it tastes like backside, you're not gonna drink it, eh? You've got to have a drink that tastes good. Pink lemonade.
And that's my theory around when you get into recovery drinks as well. It's if you crave it, you're gonna get off your bike and drink it. But also, most importantly, when you have a big event that you've been training for, when nutrition goes south, it's really disappointing because I always say you have to control your controllables, and your nutrition is a controllable, and so you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan of really breaking down how many hours am I going to be out there? What do I actually need to fuel myself? Not everyone is as lucky as being on a pro tour team where they have like a chef or a dietitian who's telling you, hey, this is what you're going to have in your bottles. So just on the average and going out and focusing on a Gran Fondo, you don't want to ruin that day because you don't have a nutrition plan.
Totally agree. And it's something simple, isn't it? And it's not rocket science. Like, there is a lot of stuff out there. And the problem is, it's quite funny. It's brilliant timing because I'm actually studying advanced human nutrition at the moment. And the assignment that I'm doing right now is gastrointestinal distress. So crook stomach in athletes. So there's so many reasons why this gastrointestinal distress is a major issue. And it's because of the marketing of so many drink companies that come out that, they put a famous name to this label, and you think, oh, this must be good. And you get so many problems with stomach. So I think, don't overthink it, but have a plan. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. Just know when you need to drink, how much you need to drink, and what you want to have directly after the event as well. So don't get disillusioned, and don't freak out by a training plan or a nutrition plan. It does sound scary. Like, I remember it scares me. Oh, can you write a nutrition plan for me, Greg? And I freak out. I'm like, dude, yeah. I don't know what a nutrition plan. Oh, okay, yeah, nah. Try and drink every 15 minutes. Take something out of your bottle. You don't have to finish the bottle. Try and that's actually a nutrition plan. Just have an idea of when you're going to drink, how often you're going to drink, when they're available, and what you're going to have directly after the event. So that literally is a nutrition plan. Don't get scared by it.
There we go. Don't get scared by it.
Words to live on, mate.
Yeah. All right, some good chat there about fueling and drinks and the like. So moving on to Q&A, we've got one question today, and the question is from Cell Toos, that was sent in via the Zwift forum. So thank you for the question, Cell. And the question reads, I know this is a very broad, open-ended question, but how does one get into Zwift racing? I'm not sure what my FTP is right now. My last test had me over 200 watts, and I wasn't nearly as fit as I am now. I finished Le Tap de Tour this past week. I've gotten into pretty decent shape. I know I'm far from where I want to be, but I would like to at least try some races. I keep hearing about Zwift Power. Is that needed if you have a turbo trainer, a smart trainer, sorry? I have an Elite Directo. I was under the impression that was only for people without direct drive turbo trainers. I also don't want to bite off more than I can chew. Any advice? Thanks, folks, and ride on.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. You know, there are a couple parts to this question that I do want to address. And first and foremost, Zwift racing is amazing. And when you do start Zwift racing, you're going to see increase in your fitness level, and just kind of what's really important is an increase in just motivation. That's what I have found. There's a couple different ways to get into Zwift racing. One, you can do it the way I've done it, which is you kind of hop in when you want to hop in and you don't care about results and you have fun with the community. The other way, and the more formal way, is you want to make sure that you are part and you share data with ZwiftPower.com. And so that's a critical piece in order to make that next step, in order to enter the race and to be accountable and to actually show up in that result sheet. After you do this, you want to create and validate your Zwift Power account. And so you want to go on to ZwiftPowerAgain.com and create an account. And they'll walk you through the next steps just to make sure that you are who you say you are. It's really important that you are hooked up and have a heart rate monitor. Most of the races out there on Zwift do require you to have a heart rate monitor so that it reduces the likelihood of cheating that may or may not happen. And so, and the next step is you find a race. You go over to the Zwift calendar, you check out your Zwift companion if you have that on your phone, and you can look at all the different races and different offerings. And you'll see sometimes there's different categories. You'll have categories where there's like A, B, C, and D, and then you'll have a category where it's just everyone at once. And so based off of your FTP, then you can choose a category that most suits your fitness level, and which is really nice because different races you're going to want to find, especially when you're climbing, you have more elevation gain. You want to make sure that you're being encouraged instead of discouraged. So you want to make sure that you're in that same fitness zone as the rest of your competitors so that it feels more realistic and that you can actually accomplish something there. With that being said, you mentioned that you haven't done an FTP test for a while. I would recommend that you do that so you know exactly what category that you want to fall into. And then, of course, you know, some of those goals can be that whether it's your placing or if you want to make it more of a personal goal, over time you'll see that your category or your FTP will continually increase, and that will happen automatically as it will self-adjust as you do more and more racing. And then obviously once you find those races, you can just join the race on that day and enter in and you're all set. So super simple, and I hope to see you out there. The second part of your question was around Z-Power, and if you have a smart trainer, do you need Z-Power, and what is Z-Power? And if you have a smart trainer, you're set. You don't need to worry about the Z-Power. Z-Power is for what they would consider the non-smart trainer, the classic trainer that a lot of people still have. They might not have power, but as long as you have a speed sensor, you can do that. And so there's a list of trainers that are online that you can check out to see which trainer would fall under the Z-Power category. There's also another category called the virtual power.
There we go. Mic drop. Perfect answer, I think.
Nothing
more to add.
Boom.
Mic drop, yeah. There you go. That's the complete guide to getting into Zwift racing. And as you said, Kristin, is super fun, and you can take it as serious or as kind of casual as you like. And the important thing is, as you said, is find the right category for you. Because if you're too strong for the category, you kind of spoil it for others, and kind of what are you proving? It's all about having fun. Get yourself in the right category, and definitely give it a go if you haven't tried before.
Do you find also it takes a couple of races to actually work out the flow of a Zwift race compared to a road race? I find slightly different tactics have to be employed. You know, it's a whole different sort of level of racing. I find you have to preempt things a lot more. Like you see a climb in the distance, you have to start getting to the front because you know they're going to go from the bottom. So just little things of positioning, even in the Zwift peloton, is so important as in real life.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously on Zwift, there is a kind of a little bit of a lag between, you put the effort down and there's a bit of a lag between your power meter kind of registering that effort and kind of sending it to your laptop or your computer, and then that effort being kind of realized by your avatar moving quicker. So unlike the road where it's more instantaneous, there is a slight lag. And that's Zwifting. That's part of the game, part of the sport, part of the competition. So it's just some nuances that you need to kind of get used to. And I know each course has got different, I call them opportunities and different challenges, and that's all part of the fun. Get involved in a wide range of different routes and different courses and different worlds, and they're all different. So it's a whole new world out there, Zwift racing, ready for you to get your teeth stuck into cell. And on that note, Greg and Kristin, thanks for your time today, as always, and a special shout out to Professor Jim. And there is, of course, more of Professor Jim to come on the next podcast. So, speak to you soon, guys.
Righto, mate. Been a pleasure. Thanks, Kristin. And the next podcast, we've got more of Jimbo, so hold on to your hats.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. And I really can't wait to get to the second half of heat acclimatization, because I've already listened. I can't even tell you how many times I've already listened to the interview. So I really look forward to diving deeper on it.
Awesome. See you soon.